My journey in music begins at birth.
I was born in September 3rd, 1979. It was like the same week Rapper's Delight was released. As a kid in New York City in the 80s and 90s, hip hop was life and life was hip hop. Everything you would hear about, you just walk out the door and walk down the street and you're witnessing all of the same things they're talking about. All the street names, all the stores, all the neighborhood characters.
Everybody was either a breakdancer, a rapper, or a DJ. Like you wanted to be one of those things. And I was afraid to breakdance because I thought I would hurt myself. And I could not afford DJ equipment, and I liked to write, so I wanted to be a rapper.
Everyday life is kind of our pop culture, like style and the way people express themselves.
You have to remember that prior to 1981, when the Sugar Hill Gang came out with Rapper's Delight, and then shortly after that, Blondie came out with a record called Rapture. Those are largely considered the two records that made hip-hop music viable in the commercial marketplace.
The whole thing was the guy would find a break in the music, a drum break that was really cool. And then he would extend it and keeping that drum break going, because what he thought was, here's this dope part of the song. How do I extend it and make it into some other song?
If you've heard of a gentleman by the name of Kool Herc, Kool Herc moved to the United States from Kingston, Jamaica, and brought his whole sound system mentality to the Bronx. And he's largely known as the father of hip hop because of his relationship with Jamaican sound system programming and his idea that extending the instrumental break of a record by using two copies of the same record and making that break extend, this is the space in which breakdancing is born. You get busy in the break of the record. You have Grandmaster Flash in another part of town. You have Grand Wizard Theodore in another part of town. You have all these pioneering New York DJs who are playing block parties, neighborhood parties prior to the commercial release of hip hop music. So there's this burgeoning underground culture of us who are functioning around these ideas.
It's anti what the normal stuff is. It's like against the system, and so I think that attracts people to it.
I remember the first time I heard turntable scratching in Rocket, Herbie Hancock, when they performed that at the Grammys.
911 by Tyler, the Creator.
Slick Rick, Children's Story.
New York State of Mind.
Me and Your Mama by Childish Gambino.
Hearing like young Nas tell the most vivid stories about that life in New York City. I've always considered that like my anthem.
The pioneering artists in rap music, some poor kids in the city finding a way to do something that could pass their time that was more healthy and more creative and more fun than being in a gang or hanging out with the wrong crowd. And they're not doing some of the things that they used to do.
I think that hip hop tells a story. It very clearly shares an experience of Black people, and with people being more interested in the Black experience and interested in the Black story, hip hop offers a window into that experience for those who don't have that experience, and for those who do, it gives them something that they can connect with.
You having to take from someone else to create something and sampling, and that changed the whole landscape of the music scene.
It's brought an art form to the world that's, in some ways, it's bridged the gap of misunderstanding between the races, between the ethnicities, between cultures. People want to understand a little bit more about America, whether it's through its visual form, whether it's through its musical form. It represents a part of the baseline of the United States that's just absolutely undeniable. And creative poor folks are the folks that make the world go round.
It moved the needle on the N-word. It put it forefront out there and made people talk about it. I know being in Europe, there were a lot of like Turkish and Arab people who felt the same as Black people. They were persecuted in their countries and they moved to Paris or they moved to Europe being treated as less than equal, and they found something common in hip hop. And I remember talking to them and them considering themselves the N-words of Europe, and they could see that from living in another country overseas.
I think the biggest thing is probably the way people talk and the way people dress.
Like I remember as a kid, for me, the coolest things to wear were all the things that people talked about in hip hop, the baggy jeans, the starter jackets. I mean, Jay-Z said made a Yankee hat more famous than a Yankee can. That really encapsulates it, you know, like hip hop has such energetic appeal across cultures, across generations, that someone like a rapper can make a Yankees hat more famous than where it came from. I think it was like one of the most astute observations I'd ever heard.
Different brands that were popular within hip hop, stuff like Supreme or like stuff like that, that kind of blew up because of musical artists.
Sportswear, athletic team stuff, and then Gucci and Louis Vuitton. I mean, when I was a little kid, that was before these high-end labels were as popular amongst the masses.
I think that hip hop has introduced people to dynamics inside of American culture that don't get taught in history books. I think that we represent a piece of fabric of this country that shows the resiliency of people of color. It shows that you don't have to have a great deal of money or a great deal of influence in order to do something that can impact people and touch people's hearts. I think that it's one of those things that only hip hop and indigenous creativity could bring to the world.
I wish people knew where hip hop started and why we're here.
By no means am I advocating for selling drugs or guns or anything like that. I dedicate a good amount of my life to help stopping stuff like that. But I also am very aware of the fact that for a lot of people, that might be all they know. And that might not be their fault for not knowing anything else. I feel like the people who are so critical of things like this, maybe they should be critical of the way society works, that so many young people have to be brought up in that life because there's so much inequality in the country.
More often than not, people who are critical of hip hop are only looking at commercial rap music, which we can all agree is rife with language and vocabulary that's not the most wholesome, especially for the youth that are following. But that's not to say that the culture as a whole is a problem. We idolize the tough guy, the bad guy, the villain with a good heart, all of those things that we embrace inside of white constructs. Why is it any different when we're talking about a construct that was created by youth of color? I think it's just an excuse to pass judgment on brown men.
Go past the surface of all the gutter and all of the glam stuff and all of this stuff that sort of rubs people the wrong way, and realize that there's a whole layer underneath of thoughtful, thought-provoking, intelligent music that goes for everything, you know what I mean? Everybody looks at what's on top and makes an assumption and doesn't take the time to go beneath to see there's a whole world of stuff that's awesome.
Hip hop is right now basically the biggest genre of music on the planet. Like everything, including the human population, and it's constantly expanding and constantly branching out. So hip hop's only going to get bigger, and it will only become more varied in its styles.
I think that the future is really bright for hip hop. I mean, breakdancing is on the verge of becoming an Olympic sport. The World Olympic Committee, one of the whitest institutions on the planet, has embraced this indigenous art form as something worthy of being titled as sport.
There's like a lot of hip hop that exists in different countries and stuff like that. Maybe America gets a more international taste of hip hop.
So many people say, oh, there's no good hip hop anymore. Everyone sounds auto-tuned. And it's like, yeah, the people in the auto-tune genre of hip hop sound auto-tuned, but there's so much more than that in hip hop. I always will come back to Kendrick Lamar. I think he's the best doing it right now, and I believe he's almost creating a new genre, but I mean, he is a pure poet in every sense of the word.
There's always going to be young people that gravitate to the opportunities that were taken by the people that they look up to, whether they look up to the Cold Crush Brothers and the Treacherous Three and Big Daddy Kane, or whether they look up to Little Uzi Vert or Drake or Kendrick Lamar. It's cross-generational, and we're not going anywhere. We're only magnifying as a people, and our ability to penetrate the world with our creativity is only going to magnify. The question is, how much ownership of that can we take as we go forward? I think the future is really bright for hip hop.